Hi class, I want to take a few minutes and talk about the methods section. I know that you might still be working on your lit review outline, but I really want to get this in before you get too far down that methods section path. First things first, I highly recommend that you work together on this methods section. Well, this assignment is supposed to be completed individually. If your group decides that you would like to do this assignment together, that is fine. I know the directions say one thing, but I am fine if you would like to work as a group, develop this method section together, and you each submit your own copy, but it can be the same for all of you. As long as you help work on it, you're welcome to submit the same one. This is the only assignment that you can do that for that isn't otherwise specified as a group assignment. Like that survey that you'll do in a couple weeks, that is an actual group assignment, and the IRB application is an actual group assignment. But the method section, I think, is really vital to do together to be able to do those assignments together correctly. So if you do choose to work together on this, you are fine to do that. Just make sure that every single group member helps and every single group member has a submission. However, if you decide, yeah, that's not really for me, that's totally fine. But you must have a conversation as a group to answer all of these questions, and then you can go and write your own assignment. Previously, before this class was redesigned last semester, this was something that groups did together. And I think it's really beneficial that you do it together, because if you're not on the same page with your methods section, you're not going to be on the same page with the survey. You're not going to be on the same page as with the IRB application. So I think it's really helpful to have that foundation together, and then you can move forward and write your lit reviews alone and draw your conclusions alone when you get into that data analysis phase. So think about it. Think about, can we do this together? If we do it together, what does that look like? What does that mean? How much of it can be done via email? How much of it do we need to have a meeting to do? I would venture to guess that you could probably do most of it via email, though it is often really helpful to have that conversation back and forth. What do you think about this? It can be done via Zoom meeting, Google Hangouts. Marco Polo is also a good choice. I know there are some groups who may not have the opportunity to meet together because of scheduling conflicts, but it is sometimes helpful to just talk it out. So Marco Polo is a really good option for that. You can record your video and send it, and someone will send you a response back when they get a chance. So that's an option. Anyway, the method section, let's talk about it. The method section is your roadmap or recipe for what you're going to do with your project. The method section is really vital for going towards that replication and validation phase. You're going to read about it a little bit later, but one of the best vital things about research is that your findings can be replicated and then validated. Once they're replicated, you say, the other researchers can say, yes, what they found was valid. Yes, this is true. This isn't just a one-off incident. There wasn't some random confounding variable that affected results. Or it sometimes helps identify what one of the confounding variables is. Replication and validation can help correct some of those mistakes that you might run into. They can put essentially the same project in place, but make a few minor tweaks and maybe see better results. So that is one of the reasons that the methods section is important. It is also important to keep you on track. The methods section says what you did and why you did it. Right now, you're going to tell me what you plan to do and why you plan to do it. When we get towards the end of the semester, you're going to make adjustments and say what you actually did, which often does differ slightly from what you plan to do, and why that was important or why it wasn't important. Okay, another important thing in the method section, I need you to tell me what your plan is. Don't tell me about all the other plans in the universe that could possibly be used. Tell me about what you plan to do and why you plan to do it. If you justify why you plan to do what you do well enough, you don't really need to talk about why you didn't do something else, because you've made a strong enough argument for what you did plan to do. The method section needs to include the following items. It will also be posted, but I want you to have this information spoken to you. Participant selection is the first thing you need to include. Who is going to be recruited for your study, including their basic demographic information. So if you're saying, we are recruiting BYU Idaho students for participation in our survey, you need to tell me what the BYU Idaho student body looks like. How many people are there to be potentially included? This would include both online and on campus, or If you're only surveying one group, then you need to say that. About the average age, gender breakdown, racial makeup, things like that. You need to paint a picture. So when I think BYU Idaho student body, or any of your readers think that, they know what you're talking about. Or if you say, hey, we're going to survey people via social media, or whatever route you decide to go, you need to say something like, we are surveying, for example, women ages 18 to 25 because we want to know about pregnancy. And we assume that most women ages 18 to 25 have not had their first pregnancy yet, but maybe thinking about it and aware of, risk factors, thinking about their nutrition, things like that. Why did we survey women? Well, because women get pregnant and men don't. Things like that. You need to explain why you chose to do that. You need to explain why you chose women on social media, or men, or whatever group you choose. Why did you choose to do that? Well, because we know a really high percentage of women in the United States use social media on a daily basis. Things like that. Provide that justification and back it up with evidence. This is the one place where you don't necessarily have to provide peer-reviewed sources. There are sources on the internet, for example, if you are going to survey people via social media, that will say what percentage of Americans have a social media account of some sort, and what percentage, and what is the frequency with which they interact with social media. You can also find that in peer-reviewed journal articles. You don't necessarily need that for this, but you do need to find a source that seems somewhat reputable to back up your stuff. So that first thing is participant selection. Who did you recruit? Why did you recruit them? And what did these people look like? The next thing is your study design. So what sampling method will you be using? For the vast majority of you will be using a convenience sample. What does that mean? It means you are going to sample people who are willing to participate in your study. That means you may be surveying BYU Idaho students. Why did you choose them? Because you can. Because you have easy access to them. You may choose to survey people via social media. Why did you survey them? Because you can, because it's fast, cheap, and easy. There is nothing wrong with saying that due to the restrictions in this class, you have chosen a convenience sample because it is fast, it is inexpensive, and it is relatively easy to collect a large amount of data in a short amount of time. There is nothing wrong with that for this class. There is something wrong with not saying those things, but there's nothing wrong with doing that. The purpose of this class is to teach you how to go through the research steps. We are not producing a peer-reviewed article. We are going through the steps, so if you find yourself in that situation somewhere in the future, that is not the first time that you've ever been there. So we're learning the steps in the process. What's wrong with the convenience sample? Please tell me what's wrong. I need to know what's good and what's bad about it. Well, a convenience sample may have an overrepresentation of one group. You can't generalize it to the whole population. All of those things are fine. I want to know that you understand why it's good and why it's bad, or for whatever sampling method you choose. You need to justify it. Don't talk about the other sampling methods that you could have used. If you choose to use convenience sampling, don't talk to me about a simple random sample. Don't talk about snowball sampling. Well, those are interesting, and I am glad that you know about them. I want to know what you know about the sampling method that you have selected. So talk about that. Okay, the next part is the data collection materials. So for the purpose of this class, you are required to write a survey. You don't necessarily have to collect data to answer your research question from that survey, but you have to send out a survey and collect data and then analyze that data. So I say you just put them together, save yourself the effort, and use that survey to answer your research question. It's kind of confusing how the class is set up that way, but for all intents and purposes, use that survey to answer your research questions. So you need to talk about the survey. How was the survey developed? Did you take questions from previous surveys? That is totally fine, but you must cite them and you must explain why you chose to do that. In some of your lit review prep and your synthesis grids, you may have come across other studies that use surveys. You are typically, unless stated, in those articles, more than welcome to use data collection instruments from another research team, but you must cite them and you must explain why you chose to make that decision. Okay, so you're going to talk about where your questions came from. Maybe you developed them all yourself. Why did you decide to do that? Were there not other questions available? Were they copyrighted? Was there something with that? Remember that there are a lot of questions available to you fairly easily for free via the CDC. Any of those nationally published surveys, you are able to pull up on the CDC website. You're able to have a list of questions from this last go round or from previous years, and you're able to take them and include them in your survey as long as they are cited. So talk about where your questions came from, how were they developed, what themes were explored, what topics, what themes were explored, and what type of questions were included. When I say what type of questions, I mean, did you include multiple choice? Did you include free response? Did you include true false? Why did you make that decision? In a lot of cases, people will include mostly multiple choice, and here's why. Multiple choice is really easy to answer for respondents, so they can go through a lot of questions quickly, and it makes your data analysis a lot easier. Those things are all fine. You will not be docked points for choosing that, but you must explain, we chose to use this answer format because of the following reasons. Okay, and then finally, you're going to talk about your procedures. So you have decided on your participants, you have decided on your study design, you have decided on your data collection materials. So then what do you do? How do you go out and contact these people and get them to participate in your study? How are you going to administer your survey? In most cases, you're going to administer it via Qualtrics, but how are you going to get people the link? Are you emailing them? Is there a code they need to scan? What are you doing? And why did you decide to go that way? Finally, once you talk about that process in which you go out and recruit people for participation, the follow-up with that, because most of the time, if you were to send out an email and make a post on social media, or even send someone a code, you're going to need some sort of follow-up, because you are going to have an initial response of people. Probably 75% of your respondents will respond within the first 12 to 48 hours. And then you're going to have a drop-off. What are you going to do when you hit that drop-off to increase participation again and get all those last-minute people who are potentially willing to participate? Are you going to send out another email? Are you going to hand out more flyers? Are you going to make another post on social media? What are you going to do? And then finally, what are you going to do with the data once you have it? What themes are you going to explore in those questions? What correlations are you going to look at? What type of analysis are you going to run? This is what we're talking about in the method section. It is a recipe. It is fairly detailed. However, this needs to be at max 2 pages double spaced. So you need to decide what is important and what is just interesting information. This is where we're really starting to head into that need to know versus nice to know information. What do I need to know to replicate and validate your study? And what is interesting and nice to know? And if you have room, you can add it in. And if you don't, then that is something future researchers will have to find out on their own. But the 4 sections you need to have in that methods paper are participant selection, study design, data collection instrument, and procedures. This is going to be posted to the class announcements as well, but start talking and thinking about that. Your group needs to come up with uniform answers to these 4 sections. You must survey the same people, because you are sending out the same study or survey. You must use the same studies design. You must use the same survey. You must use the same procedure. So like I said at the beginning of this video, in most cases, it is going to be best if you were to write this paper together so that you are all on the same page, so that you can move into that survey together, so you can move forward towards that IRB application together when the time comes. So think about it, method section, how can we interact as a group and potentially come up with something together? Or how can several group members come up with that if you do not participate in writing that method section? If your group for some reason decides to write it together, then you also choose not to get a score and you choose to do it by yourself. So just remember that. You cannot take credit for someone else's work. That is plagiarism. I know you think you're tricky, but inevitably someone will tell on you. So let's not even go down that road of plagiarizing. Turn in your own work. If you want to do it as a group, totally fine. If you don't want to do it as a group, fine, but communicate about all of the things together so you're on the same page. And when we get to that survey and IRB application, we make sure that we are together. Let me know if you have any questions. This assignment is due not this Saturday, but next Saturday, so you have a little bit of time, but we need to start thinking about it. I hope that you have a great week, and good luck finishing up your literature review outlines.